I do think that the nonfiction genre, that this is probably our best, one of our best things that we read in terms that would fit the children's literature of nonfiction. It's also a picture book, obviously, but it's okay if they're dual, and there's poetry in here, but if we were looking at literal genres, it's more of a picture book, but it's also about Gwendolyn's life, so it's a biography. All right, so I'm going to reread it, and I will also post like photos of the front and anything you need for that MLA. Okay. Gwendolyn Brooke grew up in the big city of Chicago with little money to spare. Yet her family owned great treasure, a bookcase filled with precious poems. Each night her father read fine poetry aloud, passionate and proud. Nothing sounded sweeter to Gwendolyn than father's deep voice reciting the rhythmic words. Gwendolyn memorized those lines, fine words in time, to share with her big hugging aunts. When she was 7, Gwendolyn began arranging words into poems of her own, and one day her mother found those scribbly lines and announced with sincere conviction, as mothers do when making a prediction, "You are going to be the Lady Paul Laurence Dunbar." Gwendolyn beamed. He was her favorite poet. Gwendolyn loved to sit on her back porch with colorful clouds dancing overhead and dream about her future. I was at my happiest sitting on the back porch, to sit there and look out at the western sky with all those beautiful changing clouds and to just dream about the future, which was going to be ecstatically exquisite, like those clouds. Writing became like eating and breathing to Gwendolyn. It was something she just had to do. She carefully strung words together like elegant jewels in perfect meter and time. Her rhythmic lines described paper dolls and tick-tock clocks, raindrops, sunsets, and climbing rocks. She poured her poems into notebooks, filled them to the very tops. Her room became a swelling sea of poems. When Gwendolyn turned 11, she decided to set her words free and mailed 4 prized poems to a newspaper. Her words were printed on crisp pages for the whole neighborhood to see. Elated, she sent her nature poem Eventide to a magazine, and it appeared on shiny pages for the entire country to read. Gwendolyn's future seemed as bright as morning's first clouds, but then a terrible storm blew in, the Great Depression. With too few jobs for too many workers, her father's pay was cut in half. Dinner each night was the same, beans. Hungry for food, yet more hungry for words, Gwendolyn kept writing. She sent more poems to magazines, but they were all rejected. In high school, Gwendolyn felt rejected too. She was too quiet and shy for some crowds, and her skin too dark for others. Every year she tried a different school, all white, all black, and a mix of both, but she didn't seem to fit in anywhere. Gwendolyn felt invisible, but when words flowed from her pen, she became invincible. So she spent more time than ever writing, exploring new ways to express her ideas. She even wrote a history report in rhyme. Her paper earned an A and a note from the teacher that said to keep writing. Soon, Gwendolyn headed off to college, where she devoured thick books of poetry, Dickinson, Wordsworth, and Hughes, and penned poems about her family and friends. After graduation, jobs were still hard to come by, and poems didn't pay the bill. So Gwendolyn found work wherever she could, cleaning homes, typing, even making deliveries. Then along came Henry, a handsome man who adored her poetry too. The two married and squeezed into a tiny apartment. They had a really freaking big wedding cake. I want some. In a black neighborhood where they were supposed to live, because, we sort of made that happen, white people. And a year later, baby Henry arrived. A busy wife. Yeah, don't do that when you read it to children, okay? Bias. My own biases. And political commentary. A busy wife and mother, Gwendolyn continued to write. She took a poetry class at night where she studied modern poems with different length lines, unpredictable meter and time. Inspired, she created unique poems about the nonstop busyness, the hard luck grittiness of life in the South Side Chicago neighborhood, Bronzeville, where businesses boomed on 47th Street, where hardworking families didn't have enough to eat, where people jumped and jived to a new jazzy beat. And Gwendolyn kept polishing her words until they sparkled like silvery summer clouds. I am proud to feature people and their concerns, their troubles, as well as their joys. Eventually, one of her poems won a contest, then another and another. Some were published in a famous poetry journal, but they still couldn't pay the bills. Even without electricity, Gwendolyn kept writing by candlelight, stories about life on her busy Bronzeville streets. I wrote about what I saw and heard in the street, and she kept dreaming, and a future that was going to be exquisite. Then one day, beneath a promising patch of clouds, she gathered her finest poems, stories of hardship and hope, slid them into an envelope, and mailed them to a book publisher in New York City. I really love this woman. Then she waited and worried and wondered, would they like stories about people in her neighborhood? Soon a letter arrived. The publisher wanted more, twice as many as before. So Gwendolyn composed poems in different forms, free verse, ballads, sonnets. She wrote about brave soldiers like her brother fighting for a country that didn't give everyone equal rights. She wrote about a poor man named Satin Legs Smith who fancied fine clothes. She wrote about understanding your identity, who you are on the inside. Her tired fingers wrote day and night until finally she had enough to send to the publisher. Before long, another letter arrived, and Gwendolyn grabbed the envelope, ran into the bathroom, and locked the door. Hands trembling, she opened it. The publisher loved her poems. Soon they became a beautiful book. I gotta buy this book, A Street in Bronzeville. But Gwendolyn had more stories to share, important stories about a young girl growing up, getting married, and starting her own family in a city where people judged others by the color of their skin. Those powerful poems became her second book. I'm never going to have any money after this class. Annie Allen is her second book. Gwendolyn's words drifted into the world. Her bright, brilliant clouds. Her poems helped people better understand others. They encouraged people to take a closer look at themselves. They changed the way some people thought and acted. But even two books couldn't pay all the bills. Money was tighter than ever. Yet everywhere she looked, Gwendolyn saw more stories that needed to be told. She kept writing, and of course, this is where my brain is going. I wonder if she was paid the same amount as a man, or a white man, or a white woman, for her books. Then one cloudy day in May, Gwendolyn's electricity was turned off again. Suddenly, the phone in her apartment started ringing. Was it another bill collector? She hesitated, then she picked up the phone. A reporter on the other end asked one question. Do you know you have won the Pulitzer Prize? Gwendolyn couldn't believe it. She grabbed her son and danced around the apartment. Outside, exquisite clouds exploded in the sunset sky because Gwendolyn had won the greatest prize in poetry. Okay, I don't even want to tell you that I'm not sure I knew that that was a poetry prize. Oh my God. Clouds. So this must be one of the ones. Oh, when I look into the sky. Oh no, this is she wrote this at 15. Okay. Doesn't say that this was in the book, but let's see. Oh, when I look into the sky and see those quiet clouds, now all arrayed in fleecy white, now dressed in colored shrouds, it seems that I can not draw my eye from that rich heaven land, and drinking in the wide expanse, I filled with rapture stand. Unheedful of my transfixed state, they float serenely by, those stately clouds, calm sentries of the sky. How can I fear to leave the earth when heaven holds this glow? Cloud-colored happiness and peace await me there. I know. See, I feel like all of us, if we're teaching early childhood and we want to talk about clouds, should probably be reading this poem to them. I know it's got big words, but it's all about them hearing the words, remember? All right, so one thing, because I'll probably learn something I don't know. In 1950, Gwendolyn Brooks became the first black person to win a Pulitzer Prize for poetry for her second book, Annie Allen. Over the next decades, she wrote 14 more books, including a poetry book for children titled Bronzeville Boys and Girls. Gwendolyn often wrote about real-life topics that were important to her, such as love, loneliness, family, inequality, poverty, and war. In her later years, Gwendolyn shared her passion for poetry by teaching writing classes at various colleges around Chicago. She also personally sponsored writing contests to help inspire young poets. In 1968, Gwendolyn was named the Poet Laureate of Illinois, and she was appointed the Poet Laureate Consultant in Poetry to the Library of Congress in 1985, the first black woman to hold that prestigious position. Note, in her autobiography, Brooks stated she preferred the term black instead of African American. Her preference is reflected in this book. And that actually is one of my lessons I've learned from my students, because somebody who is, well, actually our chief diversity officer insisted that it's African American, but that's his preference. And I have a lot of black students that actually prefer, like, so that if they have ancestry or a connection, ethnic connect, I don't know how to word that. I'm just gonna be honest. To like the Caribbean, I have students that have said, no, I identify as a Caribbean American, and there might be a shorter term of that Carib part, but I think it's important that it might not be relevant in terms of your children if you're really doing early childhood, but I recommend you think about, if it's coming up in your talking and you think you're being respectful, you should ask your parents how they identify. All right. Let me see if there's anything else in here. And so Gwendolyn also has this really awesome quote on the back that says, "Poetry comes out of life." All right. So the book is called Exquisite, and it's the poetry and life of Gwendolyn Brooks. I can't tell, like, to me, that looks like it's backwards. Anyway, it's by Suzanne Slade and Cosby A. Cabrera. And this was a winner of the Robert Siebert Honor Book. And let's see who published it. Honestly, you all should get this book. It's beautiful. So the publisher is Abrams Books for young readers, and they're in New York City. No, they're in New York, I'm sorry. And does it say a year? To tell you the truth, there's no year on here, which doesn't make sense. $12.99. There really should be a year. Printed in the U.S. La-di-da. How can they not have the year? I think this is one of my new favorite books, but they're really, literally, I can find no year. How is this possible? I also like that, so, you know, they have illustrations on the inside of the book that are of Gwendolyn writing during that depression when she was hungry, which I think too many of your students, I hate to say, will someday will identify with that. And it might help them too. Like, this book works on so many levels because we have way too much poverty in the country. I cannot believe they don't have a publishing date. I bet if you go to Amazon, it'll tell you what year it was published. How is there not one? All right. Anyway, I will also like post the photos so you don't have to be like playing the video over and over again. But what a beautiful book. And I do think this, and I think that Malala, the book I read about that, is also a biography. So those are really our two books that I can think of. I had a couple other ones here. I'm pretty busy with the grading. I don't know that I'll get to post them, but I have this one that's of Frida Koala, who is such a beautiful artist, and I think it's probably just an amazing, I haven't even read through this book in a long time, but you can tell it's won awards. So this is such a great book because one, it's a biography. She's an artist, and she's Latina, and it's by one of my favorite authors, Yui Morales. And then I was gonna look at this. This is Dolores Huerta, and she's a hero to migrant workers. I haven't read this in so long, I don't even remember, but things like this, these biographies, there's beautiful, beautiful picture books. And you can put them in both genres, but please only count them once. Okay, I'll post this after I get it uploaded on YouTube.